After 3:30, I see that our witnesses are in place. I see that we have quorum. We thank the minister for appearing. This is appearing, the minister and her colleagues are appearing pursuant to a motion adopted by this committee, which reads in part, that the Standing Committee on National Defence invite the Minister of National Defence to appear as soon as possible, along with various other named people in the Defence Department and all other relevant officials from the Canadian Armed Forces to appear within the next week to provide briefing of no fewer than 2 hours concerning the high-altitude surveillance balloon from the People's Republic of China that recently violated Canadian airspace, and that a briefing be held in public. So with that, may I call upon the Minister for her opening statement, and then we'll proceed to questions. Thank you, Minister, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Members of the Standing Committee on National Defence, good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour.
Good afternoon.
This month, the North American Aerospace Defence Command, NORAD, detected, identified, and tracked a high-altitude surveillance balloon from the People's Republic of China, along with 3 subsequent objects over North America. Fighter aircraft took down the 4 unauthorized airborne objects in Canadian and American airspace.
Any unauthorized entry into our airspace is deeply troubling. Such actions underscore the evolving threats faced by Canada here at home in a world defined by strategic competition and uncertainty.
Highlight the efficacy and continued importance of our binational military command with the United States through NORAD. Canada and the U.S. share a unique military bond through NORAD. Des militaires canadiens.
Canadian and American personnel from the Canadian, Alaskan, and continental U.S. NORAD regions prevent air attacks against North America and safeguard the sovereign airspaces of Canada and the United States by responding to unknown, unwanted, and unauthorized activities near or within our airspace. This agreement has kept us safe for 65 years.
Our airspace has been protected by NORAD. The downing of these objects clearly demonstrates the efficacy of NORAD. In Yukon, for example, NORAD detected this object and launched Canadian and U.S. fighter aircraft to investigate. At the direction of the Prime Minister, aircraft assigned to NORAD successfully took down the object. This was the first time that a NORAD operation has downed an aerial object in Canada. Clearly, NORAD remains a powerful and effective command. Still, we know that it needs to be modernized to meet current and future threats as well as technological developments. And that is why last year our government committed almost $40 billion in funding for the modernization of Canadian NORAD capabilities over the next 20 years in close collaboration with the United States. Through a broad spectrum of investments, we are going to be improving our ability to detect and deter evolving threats and future-proof our continental defenses for decades to come. Those recent events in our airspace are a stark reminder of NORAD's renewed importance and why these detection capabilities are necessary for our safety. Turning back to the recent incidents now,
in early February, we first analysed the situation with the Chinese surveillance balloon to determine whether this object posed an imminent threat to Canadians. At this time, we also took additional steps to safeguard sensitive information from potential surveillance activities. When it was determined that the balloon did not pose an imminent threat, we worked with our U.S. counterparts to conduct further analysis and determine our next steps.
Each subsequent aerial object, it was taken down in a way that ensured no civilians were harmed, and with consideration for potential damage to infrastructure on February 6th. Debris was recovered by the United States Navy and the U.S. Coast Guard and transferred to the Federal Bureau of Investigation for further analysis. Throughout this process, and with each subsequent aerial object, we remained committed to keeping Canadians and Americans well informed of our activities and continued that ongoing effort. As soon as it was deemed appropriate, we shared information about each balloon's whereabouts publicly and regularly updated our citizens about our efforts across a variety of channels. Même si nous ne
While we do not assess that they posed a threat similar to the Chinese high-altitude balloon, the surveillance balloon, we know that we must remain vigilant and we must keep our citizens well informed and aware of any potential risks. The surveillance balloon episode underscores the fact that there are state actors that are willing to violate our sovereignty and territorial integrity for their own aims. And we, along with our U.S. counterparts, are ready to act against shared threats.
Our joint response to these unauthorized aerial objects is a strong example of NORAD in action. Bilateral decision-making, close coordination, decisive action in response to common threats. Ces actions
These actions show the continued value and relevance of our binational command and its missions. And in a world in which Canada faces new threats from authoritarian regimes, we must do everything we can to protect our people, our country, and our continent.
Here today, and I look forward to taking your question. But finally, in terms of my remarks, I'd like to thank the Canadian Armed Forces and NORAD Command for having the watch.
Thank you, Minister. And before I open up to the first round, I just remind colleagues that the Minister is here pursuant to the motion I had read into the record earlier today. And while there may be a almost irresistible temptation to stray from the motion, I will encourage members to ask questions relevant to the motion. Mr. Bazan, 6 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the Minister for being here, and I also want to reiterate her comments that we do thank the Canadian Armed Forces and NORAD for their diligence in making sure that we stay safe here at home and deal with something that was rather peculiar that we've never had to deal with in the past. Minister, I know we talk about the first surveillance balloon that was shot off the coast of the Atlantic seaboard of the United States as being originating from the communist regime in Beijing. Can you confirm whether or not that was being operated by the People's Liberation Army?
I can simply confirm that it was a surveillance balloon that originated in China. That is what I am tracking. That is what Canada is tracking.
So you won't disclose what the surveillance equipment was for, what it was being used for, the nefarious purpose that we all assume has to be military in nature, and that has to be related back to the People's Liberation Army.
I actually would be very careful about making assumptions at this point. The debris that was shot down and retrieved off the coast of the United States near Myrtle Beach is still being analyzed, and we will be ensuring that we work with NORAD and the United States in this process, and at the appropriate time we will provide information as it becomes available.
And I assume that will be a lead from the U.S. since it's in U.S. waters that they recovered the debris. Now, when we look at the other three balloons, have you been able to determine the origin of those aircraft?
As you know, the recovery efforts were curtailed because of remote and rugged terrain. There is no indication that they are state affiliated, but the recovery efforts were curtailed, and any other available information that is obtained would be shared, of course.
The debris that's in Yukon, Minister, will be resumed. The search for that debris will be resumed in the spring after the spring thaw and things are safe enough to go back up into the mountainous areas?
To begin, public safety, not D&D,
Has lead on
jurisdiction over that search and recovery. D&D, including special forces, including multiple aircrafts, including the FBI, were participating, but the search was being led by public safety.
But at
so
the same time, there was
decision-
130 members of the Canadian Armed Forces that were on the ground, so I'd assume that in the spring that there would be either reserve troops or rangers or full-time members of the Canadian Armed Forces made available for that recovery effort.
Again, I would be careful about making assumptions. The importance of the safety and security of the Canadian Armed Forces and all people on the ground was extremely important. And at this point, as I said, there is no indication that these objects were state affiliated. And at this point, the search was called off by public safety.
Madam Minister, I want to get a clarification because under NORAD we had scrambled some CF-18s. According to Major General Prévost, who appeared here on the 17th of February, he talked about that it was only a matter of minutes before Canadian CF-18s would have intercepted the balloon in Yukon, and yet the F-22s were there ahead of us, and the U.S. Fighter jets took it down. But then if you look at some of the other information that came out here from the Department of Defense in the United States, they also said that when the balloon entered Canadian airspace, that it was Canadian CF-18 fighter jets and CP-140 Aurora aircraft that did a closer examination of that asset. Why wasn't it shot down at that point in time rather than bring those fighter jets home and then scramble F-22s to take it out? Was it a capability issue?
I'm going to ask my Chief of Defense staff
Well, I can
to-
have General Eyre answer that in the second hour if you're unable to.
It's not that I'm unable to, but there is an operational component to the decisions that were being made. I will say at a broad level that both countries' aircraft under NORAD were being scrambled, and the decision to take down the suspected balloon was made by the Prime Minister using NORAD assets after phone calls with President Biden and with the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. And I just want to clarify your question because I'm wondering if you were mixing up two incidents in your
that's just
question.
that, based upon the testimony that we received and also what's been coming out of the White House and Department of Defense, there seems to be a disconnect there, and I just want to get clarification on that, and we'll do that in the second hour. Now, John Kirby from the U.S. White House's National Security Advisory Committee actually has mentioned that there has been 5 previous balloon instances that have traveled across North America, 3 of them under the Trump administration, 2 under the Biden administration, and he said that previous excursions were just for brief periods of time. So I'm assuming that they just briefly entered Alaska and then were they over Canadian airspace, and I just wanted to get a confirmation on whether or not that happened.
I am tracking 4 incidents that I have indicated to you thus far. Suspected Chinese balloon, February 4th, Alaska, February 10th, Central Yukon, February 11th, and Lake Huron, February 12th.
And you don't know anything about previous up to 2017?
If I could just get to that, none of those previous incidents that you referred to my knowledge, entered Canadian airspace.
Do you know, to your knowledge, whether or not NORAD had detected those balloons and aircraft at that time between 2017 and 2022?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. Mr. Connell, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Minister, officials. Thank you all for being here. I want to start off by, and we talked about this in previous meetings as well, that there is somehow an insinuation that might have been made that because it was actually a U.S. fighter jet that actually shot down or took the shot, that it was insinuating that Canada did not have the capability. Now, we heard testimony that that was not the case, that there was a decision made on who might be best or why a particular aircraft was taken. Can we just get some further clarification of how that NORAD process works in determining capabilities? And is Canada capable in the event that another balloon or object to this nature were to enter Canadian airspace and the decision made that for Canada to shoot it down? Could you maybe walk us through that process?
Definitely. Thank you for the question. First of all, NORAD has a binational structure, which means that it is equally responsible to and made up of personnel from both the United States and Canada. In fact, it's the world's only binational command structure. And it employs a layered defense network of satellites, ground-based radars, airborne radar, fighter aircraft to track and identify aircraft and inform appropriate actions. In Yukon, for example, NORAD detected the object and launched Canadian and U.S. fighter aircraft to investigate. At the direction of the Prime Minister, as I mentioned, the decision was made to take down the object, and this was the first time NORAD has ever downed an aerial object in Canada. We recognize the need to continue to improve in this area in terms of decision making. That's why we're putting on the table almost $40 billion to modernize NORAD and continental defense. Going forward, NORAD will continue to exercise its mission exactly as they have done in the past. If an unknown object enters U.S. or Canadian airspace, it will be assessed. It will be identified as to whether it's a threat. If it's not a kinetic military threat, further discussion across government will occur to determine whether it poses a risk to national security, safety of flight, or people on the ground. I will say that there are additional actions that we are going to be taking. NORAD will continue to have battle rhythm drills, but it will refine these battle rhythm drills to include streamlining the reporting of unidentified objects to improve timely communication of such objects. There'll be further efficiencies in reporting and interagency cooperation.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, Minister, but I am limited on time. And I just wanted to also ask a question in regards to there was reporting, and again, I know there are different instances, but the first balloon, we heard testimony about scaffolding inside, and clearly it seemed to be fairly significant. So that's where my questions are leaning. But in terms of we heard reporting, and I want to understand if this is true or if it affected CAF in any way, but we heard reporting that it could interrupt aircraft and signaling. So I'm just curious if that was a commercial issue or if there were actually interruptions to military capabilities. And then in addition to that, how will we ensure that something like this, that we're ready and capable in the event another object like this were to fly into Canadian airspace, that it wouldn't interrupt military capabilities?
Okay, I'm going to ask Chief of Defense Staff to take the first question, but before I do, I'm just going to answer the second question.
Perfect.
Because it's essentially a continuation of what I was saying in terms of further making sure our processes are efficient and effective at a NORAD level. We'll continue to assess threats, kinetic threats, et cetera, and identify those threats. We're undertaking drills that are focused on streamlining the reporting of any unidentified objects. We're also making sure that we have a very succinct reporting structure so that we can communicate effectively amongst decision makers, and we're also making sure that we're coordinating across geographic regions. I'm going to now ask the Chief of Defence Staff if he has anything to add, especially on the first part.
So, Mr. Chair, on the first part, so any electromagnetic emissions are currently part of the exploitation analysis that are ongoing, along with the debris that was recovered. And so the public sharing of that will be dependent on the intelligence value that it has in terms of keeping it versus letting the adversaries know what success they had.
Thank you. So then, have we been concerned in the past? I recognize you said not to our knowledge that they have flown in Canadian airspace, but have any of our allies raised issues or concerns that balloons of this nature have been kind of floating into various airspaces around the world?
Very briefly, please.
Can I just take you to the specific objectives of NORAD, the raison d'etre of NORAD, which is to surveil the skies, and that it monitors and it also controls. And that's what NORAD has done for 65 years. So it is constantly monitoring the skies for any of these types of objects, and it just so happened in the month of February there were 4.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Connell. Madame Normandine, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
6 minutes for Madame Normandine. Thank you, Madam Minister, and thank you to all of the witnesses who are here today. And with my colleagues, I'd like to thank CAF, who are participating in searching for the debris. So Major General Prévost said that at one point in time, the characteristics of the search were changed, which meant they were able to identify the first balloon and also the subsequent objects because there were different types of filters or gates. So I'd like to know whether you had received information that balloon was possibly in the airspace, that you actually modified the search criteria, or was it by chance that we modified the search criteria, which meant we then discovered the balloons? As I already stated, that is the overall aim of NORAD, to continuously monitor our airspace, and the methodology to achieve that aim is that we want to be able to accomplish this mission. There's lots of different methodologies. There's lots of factors that come into play, and we need to consider all of these factors when there's a suspected balloon such as this. Now, in this particular case, I'll give the floor to the Chief of the Defence Staff, please. Mr. Chair, after the first incident, the radar operators changed their knowledge of the situation, or their awareness of the situation, and changed the search parameters, and they concentrated more on smaller objects. So I've correctly understood that it was the discovery of the first balloon that led to the criteria change, and that wasn't the case beforehand. So how did we actually discover the first balloon then? Mr. Chair, the first balloon was very big, so it was easier to find it. Thank you very much, Madam Minister. In terms of communication, because this is part of the government's mission, it seems that perhaps there was some confusion in the way in which the message came out about the appearance of these balloons, and that led to different hypotheses. Some of them were rather crazy, circulating amongst populations. Are you looking at communication plans being reviewed for similar situations in the future, and how are you going to match that up with your US counterparts so that civilians understand well, and so that we have a good message that says we're managing this correctly in the future? After each operation, we had a particular process to look at what happened and what we can do in the future to improve our processes. So this also applied here, because we also believe that we have to do our utmost in order to communicate about the current situation on the ground and also in our airspace. Thank you. And related to that, there's certain people who have observed our communications and also the reaction on the ground. And to what extent is it a plausible hypothesis that China used this type of balloon to try and see how Canada and US and NORAD would react and where there are gaps? Is that a possible hypothesis?
I am not in the business of hypothesizing prior to having data. And the reality is we don't have the data from the downed balloon off the coast of the United States, and we don't have data from the 3 other incidents. And so at this point, it would be imprudent for me to speculate on the purpose and the origins of those other 3 balloons.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I'd like to know, because the origin of the 3 other balloons is rather uncertain. We've heard that perhaps they're civilian in nature. So what are the measures that have been put up to ensure that if there are civilian-type balloons that are spotted by NORAD, that it wouldn't actually set off the same type of incident and this wave of panic in the population?
Oui, c'est une bonne.
Yes, that is a good question. You're quite right. And I'm thinking about these aspects as well. It's very important to make sure that our population is in confidence. But at the same time, the aim of NORAD is to monitor our airspace. And we're very proud of this process. Of course, there's always room for improvement with our processes. And that's the situation now. We're thinking about what we can do in the future in terms of communication and improve our communication. Would you like to add something, sir? Thank you, Madam Minister. Mr. Chair, you have to recall that the responsibility of the Transport Department is to actually monitor and control our airspace and establish the necessary regulations and policies to control and monitor these objects and civilian aircraft. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Normandine. And I'm Ms. Matheson.
Thank you to the Minister for appearing today, and as I'd like to echo from all of my colleagues, thank you so much for all of your involvement, for the CAF's efforts on this as well. Actually, I would like to follow up a little bit from what General Eyre had just said. So on the 31st, Transport Canada wasn't made aware of that first balloon, but it's on my understanding, it was in the media that in fact it was an Air Canada flight that encountered the balloon first, and then they reported it to NORAD. So was it NORAD who knew about it first, or was it in fact Air Canada? Just for clarification.
Mr. Chair, for clarification, it was NORAD who knew about it first. I'm not aware of the timeline of Air Canada, but NORAD was tracking it before it entered U.S. airspace off the coast of Alaska.
Okay. And it was determined that this unidentified aerial balloon posed enough danger that we had to shoot it down, that it was warranted to shoot down, but we didn't close Canadian airspace. That's correct? And could you explain the process of that and why we didn't close down Canadian airspace?
I'm going to get Cal to take it. Are you?
So, Mr. President, or Mr. Chair, are you talking specifically about the one that was shot down in Yukon?
I believe that it was the first incident.
Okay, so...
Oh, no, sorry, it was the Yukon one, sorry. There's so many. Okay, yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I would have to go back and talk to our experts about what control measures were put in place from a NAVCAN Transport Canada perspective to ensure that airspace was shut off. I'm not sure if that came up on the 17 February session. General Molstad, do you have an answer on that one?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Essentially, for the Yukon balloon, there was a restricted operating zone that was established, which is normal operating procedure for NORAD whenever there's an incident like this, where an investigation has to occur. For the first event that I think you referred to as well, airspace would not have been shut down because the reported altitude of that first surveillance balloon that we know came from China was at 60,000 feet approximately, well above civilian traffic, and therefore traffic would not have to be curtailed. The one in Yukon did pose a reasonable risk to civil aviation. Restricted areas were established in order to ensure people stayed away from that.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. You had mentioned, Minister, that this is deeply troubling, that these incidents all happened in February. However, there's a 2022 annual report from the U.S. Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which states that in that year, 336 unidentified aerial phenomena were reported. Of course, by those numbers, that contradicts that all of a sudden we found these 4. So I'd just like to ask for that clarification. It was I think mentioned by General Prevost that these specific phenomenon weren't squawking correctly, and so that's why they were downed. However, there's a bit of a contradiction, I think, that needs to be clarified in that if you're talking about 336 over the year, and that all of a sudden in February there were 4, that our reaction level seemed so high. Can you provide the clarification on that and why those numbers don't seem to add up?
Well, to begin, I have not reviewed the report that you're referring to, so I can't verify the information that you're elucidating. But I will say that my responsibility as Minister of National Defense is to ensure that the operational effectiveness of institutions like NORAD continue unimpeded. And what NORAD has identified, as mentioned, are 4 suspected objects that I have outlined already today, and to my knowledge, there have not been others in Canadian airspace. NORAD continues to do what NORAD does best, which is to monitor our skies and to control the skies if there are objects which are posing a risk to public safety and to our population, and that's exactly what NORAD did on February 11th.
So, I mean, I'm certainly happy to get you the report if that's what is needed. But if there were 336 identified in 1 year, there were 4 in February. Do we know how many have been reported since that time of those 4? Considering there seems to be a general average over the course of 1 year.
Again, I'm not going to take a number from another country based on a report that I have not reviewed and extrapolate to what we are doing in Canada. Reports about aerial phenomena come from many sources. This is not the same as NORAD detection. And as I said, NORAD continues to do what NORAD does best, which is to monitor and control our skies. And I'm not sure, Chief, if you have anything you want to add to that.
So, Mr. Chair, I will just add that with these 4, you had a positive radar track and positive visual confirmation by NORAD aircraft with sufficient detail to recommend actions. I can't speak to the other 200 plus that you talked about.
Ms. Manson, colleagues, to complete a second round. I've got 30 minutes of questions and 20 minutes of time, so to try and manage this, I think we'll take a minute off everybody, and that should do the trick. So you have 4 minutes instead of 5 minutes, Ms. Cramp-Nyman.
Thank you. Perfect. Well, thank you for being here today. Start by suggesting that I see that the lack of transparency and the efficiency dealing with the surveillance balloons has been concerning across the country. Further, is Canada well situated for future incidents of this nature is something that's definitely coming up with regards to increase of frequency. Today, for today's purpose, I'd like to narrow down on the chain of command surrounding the third incident in Yukon. The process of succinct decision-making is an absolute must, and I'm fearful that this is where there's some gaps. So my first question is, what kind of process was followed in order to shoot down the balloon flying over the Yukon, and could you possibly try and walk us through the necessary chain of command needed to mobilize this?
I was actually in Washington at the Pentagon as we were tracking this suspected object, and it is extremely important to know that the efficacy of NORAD is based on the mutual cooperation that we share with the United States and have shared since for the last 65 years. So I thank you for asking the question. It is part of NORAD's process to track objects, including tracking the height of the object. And as mentioned, when you have an object at 60,000 feet, it is less of a concern from a population standpoint and from a skies standpoint than an object at 40,000 feet. And the object over the Yukon was at about 38,000 feet, which did then pose a risk to the skies, which then occasioned the need to shoot it down, which NORAD effectively did.
And on what date was that when you were first made aware of the CCP's balloon?
The suspected object was shot down on February 11th, and I'll turn it to the Chief of Defense Staff for further.
But the question just, do we know when you were made first aware of it? On what date?
I would have to go back and review my notes. There were, as I mentioned, 4 incidents during a very short time period. We were tracking many of these objects at the same time. So we'll ask the Chief.
If you could just, perhaps, just in the nature of time, we could respond in writing with the to the committee, that would be helpful. Or we can do it in the second hour, just so I can, just in the nature of time, get on to the next question.
Sure.
Okay.
No problem.
Thank you. So
He has the
when,
details, yeah.
if I may, when did you speak to the Prime Minister regarding the detection of the balloon in the Canadian airspace? And were you responsible for notifying him?
I am frequently in touch with the Prime Minister on a number of items relating to the defense file, and I spoke with him at length on February 11th and communicated with him on February 10th. And I will say, again, I speak with him frequently, so.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Next question. So who was responsible for making the final decision to shoot down the object over Yukon? And what bodies were consulted and who was informed of this prior to it occurring?
Ultimately, the Prime Minister of Canada made the decision to shoot down the suspected object over Yukon through the facility and the organization of NORAD after consultation with President Biden and my discussion with the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. But again, the decision was made by the Prime Minister of Canada using aircraft that is part of NORAD.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm just going to leave the rest of my time with James. Thank you.
Okay. Now, NORAD has responsibility both for airspace and maritime domain, and Canadian Armed Forces, in a statement to Globe and Mail at the end of February, said that the Department of National Defense, Canadian Armed Forces, fully aware of recent efforts by China to conduct surveillance operations, Canadian airspace and maritime approaches utilizing dual-purpose technologies, referring to Chinese monitoring buoys in the Arctic that were retrieved by the Canadian Armed Forces. How many buoys were recovered, and what was the purpose of those buoys in our Arctic?
That technically, that's out of the range of the
So
motion.
you talked about NORAD,
but,
and we're talking about Chinese surveillance, and they attributed it to
let me
China.
finish. Technically, I think it's outside of the
I do not.
realm of the.
Let the minister answer if she prefers.
Could I? Technically, it is outside of the realm of the motion, but it is relevant to the larger issue in play here. If the minister wishes to respond, she's free to do so.
the buoys in Canadian waters were interdicted and retrieved because of operational security reasons and in an effort not to provide an adversarial advantage. I will say no more.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. Madame Lambropoulos, 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here to answer some of our questions and for the clarity that you're providing our committee. I know that in your opening statements you spoke about the balloons and how the balloons entering Canadian and American airspace really allowed us to see NORAD in action. And of course, because as it was very understandably concerning to Canadians, it was quite public. So people were made to feel that that our two countries were working together well in order to figure out what was going on and to take care of the situation. You also spoke about major investments that the government is putting towards NORAD over the next 20 years, and I'm wondering if you and your team have begun working towards a more concrete plan on what types of investments will be made, how we will improve our capability as a military and our combined capabilities alongside our partners, the United States, and if there's anything, any light that was shed on the situation because of the incidences with the balloons. Is there anything that may have changed in the plan because of the incidences that occurred in February?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I'll say first and foremost that the incidents that are the subject of this meeting highlight the importance of NORAD and highlight the efficacy of NORAD, but they also highlight the importance of continuing to modernize our continental defense and to improve the processes on which NORAD activities are based. And so, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, NORAD is the aerospace command that has been in place for 65 years. Last year, we made a commitment to upgrade our continental defense, to improve and modernize NORAD together with the United States. And what Canadians are going to see over the next number of years is continued investments in NORAD modernization that are going to support integrated systems that can defend against a broad range of air and missile threats. Let me give you some examples. Investments in over-the-horizon radar, layered with space-based surveillance, will ensure that Canada and NORAD can detect and track modern threats. Modernizing command and control systems will enable senior leaders to make faster decisions more effectively in order to maximize deterrence and defense options. Advanced air-to-air missiles capable of engaging threats from short, medium, and long distance ranges and compatible with F-35s, which, as you know, we are procuring. Augmenting key defense and logistics capabilities will extend the Canadian Armed Forces' range and mobility to respond to defense, security, safety concerns throughout Canada, including in the aerospace domain through NORAD. Et ça, c'était la question de Mademoiselle.
That was the question from Madame Normandin earlier.
Existing infrastructure in the north, which will ensure that Canada can safeguard its sovereignty by supporting new aircraft, enhancing more sustainable operations and presence in Canada's northern and remote regions, and pursuing ongoing research and development to better understand emerging technologies. And what we are doing is not only in conjunction with the United States, but we are also making sure that we are consulting Indigenous and Northern peoples in an effort to be true to reconciliation.
Thank you, Madame Lambropoulos. Madame Normandin, a minute and a half.
Thank you very much. A question in two parts. Since we've changed the filters, we can detect smaller objects Can we do that at the same time as the detection we were doing before with the larger objects, or do we have to alternate between the two because we don't have enough resources? And if we can do both together, why did we not do that earlier when we already knew that China was developing expertise, for example, for these balloons or these smaller aerial objects?
Je vais commencer.
I will start and then I'll pass on the floor afterwards. It's important to underline that we do have the capacity to make sure that we can see all of the objects that we have to observe together with NORAD. Perhaps the Chief of Defence Staff would like to add something. Mr. Chair, for small objects, it takes more efforts. It's more work to find these smaller objects. That's why we were concentrating on bigger objects. And perhaps in the second half, I can talk about new projects aiming to improve our overall capacity.
Madame Masson, a minute and a half, please.
So in terms of some of the things that have been talked about, obviously the importance of NORAD, that relationship, the sharing of information, that's all very clear and certainly agree with that. However, President Biden held a press conference on February 16th. He was talking about how his administration was going to change their internal policies when it came to shooting down these UAPs. They put forward the National Security Advisor, Mr. Sullivan, who was talking about creating an interagency group to decide that policy specifically. So NORAD obviously is this binational organization. It is separate from that leadership. However, this interagency group will be making some key policy changes and decisions on how they deal with these UAPs. How will Canada be involved in that? How will we ensure that NORAD is kept at that higher level, and is Canada doing the same thing in terms of developing an interagency policy changes?
So the object on February 10th and February 12th that the United States shot down were done under the aegis of U.S. Northcom, whereas the shoot down over Yukon was done under the aegis of NORAD. And so some of the initiatives that the United States are taking relate to their internal processes relating to the U.S. Northcom and those organizations. In terms of what we are doing here in Canada to improve our processes, as I said, we are continually looking to improve. We are coordinating across the NORAD regions to amass lessons observed during the event and to determine if any seams in reporting exist and address them right away. We are also having a multi-departmental after-action debrief to review how the Canadian Armed Forces and other involved departments feed information and contribute to air security processes
We're
such
gonna
as
have
this
to,
one.
We're going to lead the response there. Thank you. Mr. Kelly, 4 minutes, please.
Minister, the PRC has in recent weeks violated Canadian airspace as well as our territorial water, interfered with elections, intimidated Canadian citizens, operated illegal police stations. As Minister of Defence, in light of this, in particular the airspace violation, have there been any repercussions or reprimand of any of the PRC's diplomats?
I believe that Global Affairs Canada did indeed take some actions relating to these incidents.
Okay, not you, and you're not involved in that? Is that something that you...
There were reprimands, but they do not occur under the jurisdiction of the Department of National Defense.
Your government has your government declared anybody persona non grata as a result of these illegal acts?
As I said, Global Affairs Canada did take action.
Okay. There have been billions of dollars in lapsed funding for defense. Of the lapsed funding, we now know the urgent need for NORAD modernization. Have any funds lapsed that were intended for NORAD modernization?
No, NORAD modernization was just announced about 8 months ago, and so it is a 20-year project which will see about $38 billion spent over that 20 years. So
Okay.
we have continued plans to make relating to the upgrades to continental defense.
What progress has any procurement already begun, and has anything been actually taken forward and actioned in terms of NORAD modernization so far?
There are a number of items on the agenda in the short term, one of which is over-the-horizon radar. We are working very closely with the United States through NORAD and bilaterally to ensure that the over-the-horizon radar, which is so important to move our surveillance further and further north, is well in hand.
Okay. Are you? Pardon me? Oh, well, we got lots of, thank you, Mr. Chair. In earlier testimony, we heard that the delay, or actually perhaps you can walk us through the timing of when the balloon that was shot down over Yukon, this was, do you know, or can you tell us when it entered first North American airspace and then Canadian airspace?
The suspected balloon was shot down at 3:42 p.m. on February 11th. We had been tracking it for hours before it was shot down. Of course, there was decision-making that needed to occur, and we needed to make sure that we could get infrared sighting or radar lock on the object in order to shoot it down.
I'm speaking of the one that was shot down over Yukon.
That is the one that I was referring to in my response, February 11th,
Okay.
3:42
In earlier
p.m.
testimony, we were told that it was a question of daylight and being able to identify. So you said 3 p.m.?
It was a question of daylight. It's in the Yukon, and the daylight hours are much
Okay.
different than they are here.
So the point then is, to what extent darkness represents a gap in domain awareness?
I'm going to ask my Chief of Defense staff to...
We've got him for the next hour, so
address it.
if not, then, okay.
It is a good question. Final question goes to Mr. Fisher. 4 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank you, Minister, for being here, you and your team. Gentlemen, thank you for joining the Minister here today. Minister, I want to thank you for the level of transparency you've shown on this. You and your team and officials have offered numerous briefings on this topic over and over and over again, and Canadians have had every opportunity to hear everything that we know, and as we were learning, each individual snippet. Minister, we hear at this committee an awful lot that states like China and Russia are destabilizing the rules-based international order. With incidents like this surveillance balloon, we're seeing China act more aggressively and in a more open and adversarial manner towards, I guess, Western nations. Can you tell us a little bit about what this means for Canada? How are we adapting to meet that challenge that China poses? And also, what do we need to do going forward?
When it comes to the surveillance balloon, the United States took definitive action to bring down China's high-altitude surveillance balloon, and one that violated Canadian and U.S. airspace and international law. And so you're correct. It is extremely concerning, especially as we see China being more and more aggressive. So this is a space that we are watching very closely. It underpins our view in the Indo-Pacific strategy that we need to be eyes wide open on China and that we must challenge China where we need to. Emboldened authoritarian regimes like China and Russia are displaying an unacceptable aggression. And what we need to do is to be cognizant of a more assertive authoritarian regime in each of these countries. In particular, your question dealt with China. China is an increasingly disruptive global power. It increasingly disregards international rules and norms. And as China disregards UN rulings in the South China Sea and militarizes that region, for example, it is also creating challenges to navigation and overflight rights, and it has engaged in coercive diplomacy. Canada will and must unapologetically defend its national interests, as we set out to do in our Indo-Pacific strategy. And as you may know, that Indo-Pacific strategy is making several investments in defense over the next 5 years, which I can go into if you like.
A little over a minute. Thank you. This incident really shone a light publicly on NORAD's capability. Can you, and I think Ms. O'Connell maybe touched on this a little bit, but can you walk us through how Canada and the U.S. work together through NORAD and how our massive investments are going to improve our capability as a military?
Sure thing. Approximately 1,000 Canadian Armed Forces members support NORAD in fulfilling its missions of aerospace warning, aerospace control, and maritime warning for the defense of North America. As a country, Canada also contributes fighter aircraft, command, communications, and control nodes, bases, and forward operating locations across the country. And what we are doing in NORAD modernization is to upgrade our contributions to NORAD. We're investing in new technological solutions such as over-the-horizon radar, which will greatly enhance early warning and tracking of potential threats to North America. And these investments are going to help protect Canadians from new and emerging aerospace threats in an era where technological development is continuing to occur and in an era where command and control is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. And with that, I'm going to suspend. But before I do, I want to thank the Minister for her appearance here today. We appreciate your making yourself available, and particularly on this day, which is going to be an interesting evening with the President of the European Union. So with that, we'll suspend and then allow the Minister to leave, and we'll reconvene in a moment. I'm assuming, General Eyre, that you have no opening statement, but correct me if I'm wrong.
No, Mr. Chair, I have no opening statement. Happy to be back here. I will say this is General Molstad's first committee appearance in his career. General Molstad is the Deputy Commander of Canadian Joint Operations Command, and during the time of these incidents, he was the acting commander of CJOC. He's also an F-18 pilot with more than 2,200 hours of flight time. So any technical questions, I will be leaning on him.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you, and welcome General Molstad to the committee. We hope it's not too painful for you. So we're going to see how painful it might be by opening the floor to Mr. Brazan for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and General Molstad, welcome to committee, and we'll probably get to see you many times going forward. And I'm sure if you follow the lead of General Eyre, you'll be doing just fine and dandy. He's always been very upright with us, and I always appreciate his candor. And good to see Deputy Minister Matthews and Mr. Quinn here again, regular features, and we just saw each other yesterday, so at Proc. So it's always good to have everyone here. Now, I'm still trying to connect the dots, because when we look at the incident in Yukon, and you talk about, what the U.S. Department of Defense says versus what we heard here at committee from Major General Prévost, and and now we find out that the shoot down actually happened at the afternoon at 3:30. I think everybody made the assumption that was the balloon had transited Alaska through the night, but yet we had CF-18 fighter jets and CP-140 Aurora doing surveillance on the balloon, trying to make a determination what that object was and what type of risk it posed. So we had CF-18s in the area. I'm just wondering, were those being refueled in air? Were they had they done their flybys and then were put at our forward operation location in either Whitehorse, or were they up at Inuvik, or had they returned to Cold Lake? What's the reasoning why the CF-18s didn't shoot down the aircraft after observing it in Canadian airspace for, and you can tell me, how many hours was the balloon in Canadian airspace before we made the decision that it had to be shot down?
So, Mr. Chair, a lot there, so this may take a few minutes to explain the details. But let me say up front that this shoot-down occurred exactly the way we practice, exactly the way we train. We train all the time in cross-border operations using other nations' assets, Canadian aircraft in U.S. airspace, U.S. aircraft in Canadian airspace. So this worked. The communication worked. My discussions with Commander NORAD, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the briefings up to the Prime Minister, almost textbook. That being said, there are some lessons that we are garnering from this. But going to the exact specifics of your question. And so I was informed the night before, February 3rd, that there was an object that had been picked up transiting Alaskan airspace. It was night. They had a radar lock. It was slow. There was no indication it was a kinetic threat, but they wanted to confirm in daylight what it actually was. And so it just so happened that as it transited Alaskan airspace, it entered Canadian airspace right at daybreak. And so American 2 F-22s were on station to be able to characterize that object as it entered Canadian airspace.
And you were talking about the one that came into Yukon, right?
Yes, the one that was shot down in
So this
Yukon.
is number 3, right?
Number 3,
I think,
correct.
Chief, just, I believe you said February 3rd, the night before. I believe you meant
it's
February
February
10th.
11th.
Just to...
Oh, correct. Yes, February 10th.
February 11th.
Incidents. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, DM. So
I'm confused enough as it is.
I gave direction that it would be preferable for the Canadian F-18s to do the shoot-down, but whoever had the first best shot to ensure that we had it. It was under command of the Canadian NORAD region, so a Canadian general officer who made the final decision. Our F-18s were very close. Yes, yes. But I will say they were delayed in departing Cold Lake because of freezing rain. I understand that the airstrip was a bit of a skating rink, as happens in northern Alberta. So in all operations, there's some friction. That's why they were somewhat delayed. The shoot down occurred As you mentioned, it was like 15:41 hours, so 3:41 hours Eastern Time, so Ottawa time.
So it was mid-afternoon.
Mid-afternoon here in Ottawa, but in the morning in Yukon. Our F-18s were on station shortly afterwards.
3 hours.
So hopefully this clarifies.
Okay, so it was shot
decision
down
process.
around 11:41 Yukon time?
Yes.
Because they're on Pacific time. Okay. But still, it was daylight, and the first ones on the scene, had the CP Aurors arrived to do an assessment, as it was stated by the Department of Defense?
Yes.
So they had come out of, I would assume, out of Comox?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so as we talk about NORAD modernization, and we talk about NORAD also being maritime domain awareness, and as the minister already talked about these buoys that were picked up in the Arctic, can you confirm, as it was in the media, that they are of origin from the regime in Beijing? The buoys that the Canadian Armed Forces picked up in our Arctic waters.
So let me just say that we are seeing an increasingly assertive China in the Arctic. They have designs on the Arctic. If you take a look at their icebreaker program, if you take a look at their
So
declaration.
would you suspect that that's how they were delivered?
As a near Arctic nation, the research that they're doing, the research vessels that have transited through the Arctic, which we suspect are for dual use. Yes, we are concerned about China's designs and activities in the Arctic. I'm not going to get into operational details because that could compromise some sensitive operations, but we are very concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you.
Sorry. Oh, Mr. Souza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, generals, and welcome, Chair Molstad. So, a lot of discussions today, a lot of talks about balloons over the last number of weeks, and we're still struggling to determine what they were and why. And it begs the question, given all the modernization, all the investments that have been made, the improvements and the effectiveness of NORAD over the last 60 years in controlling and defending our airspace, why would China throw in a slow-moving balloon? Like, what is it that, and of course, you've been monitoring it and you've been assessing it, and you see it coming, and you've taken a determined decision to bring it down at a certain point in time because you want to see it. But what, in your impression, why would China do it this way?
So, Mr. Chair, bottom line from my perspective, we don't know. A surveillance balloon does perhaps provide some advantages in terms of its persistence over an area, but there are other capabilities, satellite capabilities as well, that could provide almost the same, if not better, collection capabilities. So we don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so now going forward, a lot of investments are being made in modernization. We have a number of Canadians up in the far north, Indigenous especially, and the respect, and General Malside, you're a fighter pilot. These exercises, I guess part of the question is in respect to the Canadians and the Indigenous people specifically. How are we addressing that?
So, Mr. Chair, through our Joint Task Force North that is located in Yellowknife, they do extensive community engagement with the various communities up there. In this case in particular, with the shoot down of the object in the Yukon, I'm going to turn over to General Molstad to give you a rundown of the extensive engagement that's been done.
Yes, Mr. Chair, absolutely. Joint Task Force North, and this is a characteristic of the regional Joint Task Force structure we have within Canada. They have great links with the local community, and so they were engaged on a daily basis with a couple of First Nations within the North, particularly the Trondek-Quechua and the Nacho-Niek-Dun First Nations, where their territory was assessed to be underneath the area of the shoot down. Furthermore, they continue to engage with municipal and territorial authorities. On the 21st of February, we had an engagement through our JTF North team with the Arctic and Northern Policy Framework, our All Partners Working Group as well, which included provincial, territorial, and Indigenous officials. And so we tried as best as possible to keep them informed throughout. Also speaking with the representative from the Yukon of the Assembly of First Nations as well. And so extensive consultations and communications occurred.
It's excellent. There's some insinuations possibly being made that maybe the capabilities of the Canadian Air Force wasn't there in order to bring down that balloon. Can you clarify that that's not indeed the case?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Our CF-18s are more than capable of shooting down some of these high-altitude objects that we have detected. It was simply, as the Chief of the Defense Staff stated, a best sensor, best shooter for the particular objective of the day. And really that's what we're driving towards with our allies and partners in a conflict situation. We want the best sensor and the best shooter to be able to take action for best effect.
Thank you. How much time do I have?
Just under 3 minutes.
Gentlemen, when I look at the North and the strategic importance of the area, the sensitivities of China and Russia, to that extent, how effective are we at monitoring their airspace relative to what's happening now to us?
So, Mr. Chair, without getting into the classified realm, I would say we have work to do. And that speaks to the importance of the capability the minister spoke to, the over-the-horizon radar, to provide us that greater domain awareness. We have gaps in the north in our radar coverage, which we urgently have to address, and that's why this OTHR system is of such importance.
And this is the Indo-Canadian Pacific strategy as well that we're talking about?
No, this is...
Can you explain a bit about that? The Indo-Pacific strategy, like the Indo-Pacific strategy, and how we're operating in the exercise that we're doing relative to that initiative?
So, Mr. Chair, relative to the Arctic?
We're building friends and allies. We're deepening our defense relationships with other regions. They're all paying attention to what we're doing in NORAD and up here in the north, specifically around this area. The Asia-Pacific are also sensitive about what we're doing, right?
So, Mr. Chair, our friends, partners, and allies in the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific region are certainly interested in what is happening in the north, particularly our ones in the North Pacific, Japan, and to a certain extent Korea. I'm happy to say that we have excellent relations with those two countries. I myself spent a year plus serving in Korea, recently hosted my Japanese counterpart for a visit to Canada here. Japan's most recently released national security strategy and national defense strategy mention Canada as a partner. And so those allies, those friends, those partners, very, very important that we maintain and further develop that relationship.
Thank you, Susan. I just say to colleagues, I had been fairly restrictive on the motion that was in front of us in the first hour, just to stay on the topic, but we are starting to wander from the actual motion. I'm happy to let that wandering carry on, given the, and especially given the quality of the witnesses that are in front of us. Having said that, it would greatly encourage the chair if you stayed somewhere close to the motion that is in front of us. So, Madame Normandie, 6 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I'd like to come back to the detection capability for these conventional larger objects that took place up until recently, and the capacity for detecting smaller objects. We saw that quite quickly we were able to make this transition to detect small objects. Apparently it wasn't a question of hardware or capability. So I'd like to know what is putting brake on doing the two at the same time? Is it human resources or is it monetary resources that are missing? Why were we not doing the two at once up until now?
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, it's a question of level of effort. It takes many efforts to find smaller objects that are slower moving. I'm very happy that there's this new initiative, new project called Pathfinder, which is going to focus on cloud computing and AI, artificial intelligence, in order to find the threats in a wide space using a great deal of intelligence. Would you like to add something? Well, we're doing the two things at once. We can see the smaller objects and bigger objects at the same time. As the Chief of Defence Staff has said, it takes many efforts for analysts who are analysing what they are seeing on their screens, on their surveillance systems. But we can do both at once by using technology which is advancing very quickly, especially with artificial intelligence. We can really improve this so that we are able to automatize that. That's exactly what I wanted to know in terms of effort. What did it actually represent? Now, we know that since 2018, China has been developing its surveillance balloon expertise. Is this not something we should have set up earlier? And people in NORAD, I imagine, were aware of this expertise being developed in China, but was it because it was not perceived as a potential threat? So why did we not develop that capability to act on the two fronts, the smaller and the bigger objects at the same time? Mr. Chair. You have to recall that NORAD is there to deal with threats to aircraft, quicker, bigger aircraft compared to balloons. But now we have to pivot and change our focus. NORAD is busy examining and reviewing its role vis-à-vis balloons. Thank you. And now I'll go a little bit out on left field. It seems that we're changing the role of NORAD to aim these different technologies. Are we really up to date when it comes to the cyber side of things? Because there can be a cyber aspect with surveillance, balloons and aerial surveillance. Everything has to be integrated, but perhaps we're acting too much in silos. So could you update us on what's happening there? Mr. Chair, that's an excellent question, because cyber threats are real threats for the NORAD network. So we have to protect our networks to ensure that we get the true information. Thank you. During our first panel, it was mentioned, and you have mentioned also the fact, General Eyre, the fact that we can't have 100% coverage of the terrain, and we're tracking the different objects. There were certain areas where we lost the object temporarily. So what is the rough proportion of the North American territory where we lose coverage if we're trying to track objects of the size that we just observed? Mr. Chair. We have a challenge when it comes to most of our north. That's why NORAD modernization is important. In particular, the over-the-horizon radar is very important so that we can master and have knowledge of this territory. It says more than half of the territory that we're able to cover, or less than half for these smaller objects. What's a rough percentage? More than a half, I believe the speaker said. And then in terms of communication, I raised that with the minister. Are there certain things that could have been improved in terms of communication with the population about what was in the airspace? Perhaps there are some gaps that have been identified on the defence side? Mr. Chair, there's always something that we can improve. That's why after each incident, after each operation, we have a process to actually review the actions and the incidents and things to be improved. In this case here, I believe we can improve our communications, but we must admit that this is the first time that we've been confronted with this type of thing. So we've got a great deal still to learn. Thank you very much.
Chairman Dean, your timing is amazing. Ms. Masson, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. All right. So one of the questions that Mr. Souza had asked was why these balloons. What's the purpose? Why, with all the technology and these advancements, why the balloons? So you've got this slow-moving balloon, and a later question was responded to by Major General Molstad that the CF-18s were more than capable of shooting this down. But I think you had said, Mr. General Eyre, that it was freezing rain and there was a delay, right? And so it was the first best shot. I review back to what the minister said, and I just want clarification. When I was asking about the information that we share, the relationship in terms of NORAD, she said that when objects are in U.S. airspace, it's for them to determine how they deal with them. When objects are in Canadian airspace, it is for us to determine how we deal with them. However, we work with NORAD to take them down as opposed to the U.S. who takes them down themselves. So could you, is that, am I understanding that correctly, or have I misunderstood? And in terms of if we are more than capable, and yes, there's first best shot, but if the Americans and all of that data, we don't listen to it, we don't take their information, we don't allow their their interagency processes and changes, if they're not being taken into account in terms of that NORAD relationship, or if we are, I just want that clarification on what was said in the previous panel in your calculation, because I ran out of time in my questions.
So, Mr. Chair, I think these incidents showcase the importance of NORAD for the defense of our continent. The information that was going back and forth was just as we practiced, just as we trained. The consultation going back and forth, the sharing of awareness as to where certain objects were. For us, it proved the criticality of NORAD in terms of understanding what was approaching our airspace. In all cases, they went through American airspace first. And so if we did not have those linkages, if we did not have those relationships, if we did not have this binational command, we could have been very easily surprised with something popping up in our airspace.
So if the first best shot had been that our Canadian Air Force could get to an American site first, would we have taken the first shot? Would that have absolutely happened? So
to be clear, and the minister alluded to this in her remarks, the engagement authority in Canada is the Prime Minister. The engagement authority in U.S. airspace is the President, regardless of whose aircraft are there. And that's why we practice this, to be able to use other nations' aircraft in another country's airspace.
That's not necessarily the question.
Okay.
All right. I'll move on then. So if I could just address, you said the first best shot, just out of curiosity, over Lake Huron, it was actually the second shot that hit. It wasn't a first best shot. Why was that? Could you explain that incident and why it was missed the first time and the considerations that were taken into account over Lake Huron?
So, Mr. Chair, so let me characterize first best. The first best shot direction I gave was to who would take the shot. In terms of incident number 4 over Lake Huron, why it took 2 missiles, well, the first one missed. I will ask General Molstad, from a fighter pilot perspective, if you'd like to add anything.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Obviously I can't speculate why it missed. There could be a multitude of reasons that I'm not privy to based on what the pilot was seeing in their cockpit and the type of missile shot that he was taking and the quality of that missile shot. However, that being said, missiles don't always hit their targets, and that's why you always take a shot, you analyze, and then you take a shot again. However, clearly we're seeing that the infrared missiles that are being used have got a high probability of success against these targets.
Mr. Chair, if I could jump in, General Molstad, probably worth explaining. First best shot is not also just about can you successfully hit the target. It's about where the object is and where it would come down and what would happen if it missed.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. All of these, there's a number of factors that are considered. As the Deputy Minister mentioned, where it's located, are there any collateral risks on the ground? Is it an area where you can engage with an air-to-air missile that is going to be safe if it doesn't actually hit the target? So all of those factors are considered, certainly, in the whole decision-making process.
I know that I find it a bit concerning myself that we spend a great deal of money on the very fancy equipment. Maybe even it's getting fancier as we procure more, and yet we missed the first time. That's concerning, and it's a slow-moving balloon. But I'll move on. So the slow-moving balloon. It's stated that you weren't really sure why it was chosen. Now, is it possible that China could use this surveillance equipment because we would underestimate it, because there have been 336 of similar type aerial objects that they were able to, and we discussed this actually in the last committee. There was an understanding, and actually I think we discussed it with the minister here earlier, that there was an understanding that we didn't want to infer what China was watching, if they were watching our reaction to it, how they were monitoring that. But they responded quite angrily when those surveillance balloons, all four, were shot down, and that there was that inference of some bad blood on our part, I guess you could say. So is that being considered as part of all of this? Are we looking at why they had chosen those specific balloons?
Unfortunately, Ms. Matheson is out of time, way out of
Every time.
And I'm sure that General Eyre and his colleagues would love to answer that speculative question. With that, I'm going to ask Ms. Cramp-Nyman to go for the next 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'll start with General Eyre. On October the 18th, when you were here, I asked you if we should be experts in Arctic readiness. You indicated that readiness has 4 components: the people, the equipment, the training, and sustainment. We need to focus on all 4 of those to be able to conduct operations in the Arctic. So my question is Canada currently holding up our end of the bargain with NORAD? We don't have enough people, we don't have enough modern equipment, insufficient training, and as a result, sustainability is in question. So where are we at? And I guess, where are we at?
So, Mr. Chair, lots to that question. In terms of holding up our part of the bargain with NORAD, remember the role of NORAD is airspace domain awareness and control. And that's why NORAD modernization is so important. With the radars, with the weapon systems for the fighters, with the tankers, with the infrastructure to be able to put our fighters further up in the north, have them pre-positioned. And so that group of projects is us holding up our end of the bargain. Now, as we look at continental defense and Arctic security writ large, there's many other capabilities that we need to continue to develop to make sure that in the years and decades ahead that we are in a position. That being said, we continue to exercise in the north, and as we speak, exercise. One of the subcomponents of exercise Nunavut is ongoing, and General Molstad can explain that in much more detail if you wish.
Perhaps General Molstad could also talk to us about how long does it take to train new fighter jets in his answer, and also with regards to the Aussie F-18s, do we know how many are operational and how many F-18s were cannibalized for parts?
I can, obviously, as we are procuring the F-35, the specifics of the course that will be required to train our pilots is going to be developed. We'll learn a lot from our allies and partners that have already trained their pilots on this platform. And so we're not going to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but we don't expect it to take any longer than it takes to train a current CF-18 pilot. In fact, it'll probably take less because the aircraft has so much more modern capabilities. Much of the training will be done in simulation. Obviously, there's no two-seat F-35s, and so simulation, and then you jump into the aircraft. As far as the number of F-18s from Australia that are being used, I can't give you the answer specifically right now, but we can take that question on notice and provide it to you.
Next, has the reconstitution affected our ability to react to threats in Canadian airspace? So, for example, did the shortage of personnel or equipment factor into the decision to allow the Americans the opportunity to shoot down the Huron and Yukon objects over Canadian airspace?
No, Mr. Chair, absolutely not. Our F-18s on standby remain on standby, and reconstitution has not affected our ability to continue to have those F-18s on alert.
Perfect. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to James Bazan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Shelby, for sharing. Now, when we are doing aerospace domain awareness under NORAD, of course, there's that constant communication between Canada and the United States, and with the embedded personnel in our operations right across North America. Now, with maritime domain awareness, which is now also falling under NORAD responsibility, when the Chinese Communist Party's buoys were discovered in the Arctic, did that get reported into NORAD as well?
So, Mr. Chair, I do not have the answer for that.
Okay. So when we are dealing with this definitely more aggressive and provocative posture by the People's Liberation Army and the PRC, have Canada and the United States made reports of these activities to other international organizations that we belong to file complaints, military awareness, briefings that's been provided to other partners and allies?
So, Mr. Chair, before I perhaps turn this over to maybe the Deputy Minister or Mr. Quinn, I will say that we value our Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement, and we share intelligence back and forth all the time. Likewise with NATO. And so these relationships from a defense and security perspective are vital for Canada.
I will, Mr. Chair, I'll be very brief. Echo the Chief's comments, except the relationship extends to the civilian side as well, where we engage our civilian counterparts to talk about the threat environments and various opportunities and what's changing. So the dialogue is open, and we do share the information we have with key allies.
Thank you, Mr. Bazan. I just note, colleagues, we are wandering way far away from the motion, but I do concede that I opened that door. And it is because we have such quality witnesses here, and it is a privilege to ask you these questions, but it's also our responsibility. So, Madame O'Connell, 5 minutes, please.
Chair, thank you again for appearing. I asked in the earlier panel with the minister about the rationale or the damage that this capability could do, or I asked whether it was specifically commercial kind of interruptions, or if the balloons could actually interrupt military operations. And I know we're limited on time, so I wanted to ask additionally for more information on that. And I guess why now? Was there something triggered in the sense, we saw media reporting that there was the first balloon was quite large. I think we saw pictures on social media of regular people just posting saying, what is this? So I can understand why that got attention. But then it seemed that when some sensitivities were changed in terms of monitoring, that's where other objects were picked up. Is that accurate? And can I get a little bit more details in terms of any kind of the interruptions that the technology could have impacted on the military capabilities? Commercial flights, I understand, but any military capabilities?
Mr. Chair, with respect to the first high-altitude balloon, And so we monitored it as it traversed Canadian airspace to ensure, to have an awareness as to what infrastructure it was going over. When it was first detected and intercepted and then characterized by NORAD over Alaska, the assessment from Commander NORAD was it did not pose a kinetic threat to North America. And so this is new territory for NORAD. Understanding that NORAD was designed for fast-moving aircraft and intercepting those, so slow-moving balloons that don't present a kinetic physical threat to North America, but are more a threat to our sovereignty and perhaps intelligence gathering. It's new space for us. Now, given that it was much slower, it gave us that decision space to characterize it in more detail, have deliberations as to what to do with it, and those deliberations carried on as it crossed into American airspace, and ultimately the President of the United States made the decision to take it down. But in terms of posing a military threat to us as it transited Canadian airspace, no. Could it have? Well, the exploitation of the debris will determine that.
You. And following
Mr. Chair,
up on...
can I just add one more quick comment? Just to elaborate on the Chief's comment about the speed, also with the balloon versus the more traditional objects, easier, not with perfection, but to forecast where it's going. So again, from a monitoring perspective, it's not like a traditional airplane.
Thank you. And even some of the information that, again, was kind of determined at committee and, again, subsequent reporting, even as just a regular person watching this and following this, it was kind of surprising, why not just shoot it down the second you see it or the second you're able to? But it was that ability to understand. Like I said, I was kind of surprised the hearing of the scaffolding. I think there were even photos to that effect released by the U.S. And that makes a lot of sense of why you'd be very precise of where you're going to shoot that down and where you'd like to then collect that. So that does make some sense, and I'm glad we've had some of that information shared with us as well. This might be too hypothetical, but I'm going to ask it anyways, just because I'm curious, and some of it was touched upon with my colleagues as well. With all the advanced technology, drones are the thing that I would have been more worried about, especially when you can attach weapons to drones, et cetera. It's kind of an interesting take to choose a balloon of all the technology in the world, but would it be a fair maybe assumption based on some of the commentary that might have been precisely why a balloon would be chosen, is that we're watching for this new emerging technology, and something slow moving may not pick up those regular radars, so to speak, or they could be confused as weather balloons that would be quite normal, or regular research balloons. Again, this might be a hypothetical and trying to get into the minds of another nation, but are we now really thinking about how, advancing technology also means on a little bit of a relying on old school techniques to fly literally under the radar? Sorry, it's too long.
The member has invited you into a highly speculative realm, and she is not giving you any time to answer the question. In the event that you have an opportunity to go back into that highly speculative realm, you're more than welcome. But in the meanwhile, Monsieur Désolé, 2.5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
You have 2.5 minutes, Mr. Désilets. Thank you and welcome to all the guests. You've said that the coverage was less than 50% for Canadian territory. Is that correct, General Eyre? Less than 50% coverage? Mr. Chair, yes, that is my understanding. And what is the part that's not currently covered and that is most at risk? It's the far north, Yukon and the far north territory. And should we be concerned in the short term? Mr. Chair, yes. That is why we want to modernisation of NORAD with OTHR, over the horizon radar. And with all of these projects that are related to NORAD modernisation, this is the most important one. Now, you've referred to modernisation. After that modernisation, will we have 100% coverage of Canadian territory? Mr. Chair, I don't have all of the details on this project. Perhaps Mr. Quinn could add something? Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair.
Case, we're working closely with the United States to together pull together a layered system of surveillance systems with over-the-horizon radar stationed in Canada and also the U.S. So the combined effect would be, I don't want to say with certainty that it will be 100% of our territory, but it will be a vast improvement over what we have today.
Et on peut s'attendre à ce
And can we expect that this modernisation would be completed when? General Eyre or Mr. Quinn, as you wish.
Sorry, thanks for the question. So, as the minister said earlier today, it's a 20-year program of investments. We're moving out as urgently as possible, as quickly as possible, sorting out details for the first highest priority investments as we speak, in close collaboration with the U.S.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Madame Masson, 2.5 minutes.
I think with my presumptive questions and Ms. O'Connell's presumptive questions in the long preamble, if you could, because I know that you were about to answer, Mr. Matthews, and maybe we could go into what you were going to say to both as they were related.
Certainly, I'll start, Mr. Chair, and if the Chief wishes to add, please do. But I think it's important to draw a distinction between the first object that was shot down off the coast of the U.S. versus the others. The first one, bigger, but also confirmed it came from China. On the other three, as the minister said, not yet known, or not known is a better way to say it. So I don't think we can, when we think about the reaction of China, it was around the first one and the reaction. And yes, absolutely lots of speculation on where the other three came from and what their purpose might be. But at this stage, it is speculation.
And in terms of the minister also said, there's a process. The FBI is doing the analysis. Is there any sense of a timeline on when we're going to know that? And I know that the Yukon retrieval was abandoned. The Lake Huron retrieval was also abandoned. Is there any chance of revisiting that just so that we can be sure of what we're dealing with?
Mr. Chair, in terms of the exploitation of the first object, that's not sure of the timelines. As you are correct, that's being led by the FBI and the U.S. system. In terms of restarting the search, once the snow is gone, this is a public safety responsibility. But if the decision is made to restart it, given our assets, I expect we would be asked to support that.
Ms. Gallant, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any procurement bottlenecks holding up NORAD modernization?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. NORAD modernization was announced over the summer, so very much early days, so no procurement updates.
Okay. Given the overt aggression we've seen in the far north, is NORAD modernization being accelerated?
So, as was mentioned, Mr. Chair, some of the early projects, and it's multiple projects over 20 years, but some of the early ones, over the horizon radar is a key one to flag as an early project we need to move out on quickly.
And is it being accelerated?
To the extent,
over 20 years is a long time, and we have incursions right now.
So, in terms of the projects themselves, they're being planned at an accelerated rate, and obviously in collaboration with our U.S. So, I've mentioned over the horizon radar as one we want to move on as quickly as possible with our U.S. allies.
In 20 years. Okay. General Eyre, did you have any direct communication with the Prime Minister?
Mr. Chair, yes. In these cases, the Prime Minister is the engagement authority, and I'm the one that briefs him on these incidents. So specifically with the shoot down in the Yukon, I briefed him, gave him the engagement parameters, and received his authority or his permission to go back to NORAD and give them the green light.
Okay. Does Canada currently possess the capacity to handle further airspace breaches independently?
So, Mr. Chair, for clarification, that is independent from NORAD?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that's a question that we would have to look at the specifics of where it would happen, where it would occur, what the incursion was. So I cannot give a definitive answer.
So do we have the capacity to handle further airspace breaches independently?
So again, Mr. Chair, independently, where would it be occurring? What would the breach be? What would it consist of? Would we need advance warning from coming from offshore? So there's many factors that would go into this question.
Why wasn't the Canadian public notified about these balloons until after they were shot down?
So, Mr. Chair, as we went through the process of determining whether or not something would be shot down, time was moving fast, and that decision was is one that, as we take a look at the after-action review, we'll take a look at the communications aspect of this as well to see what could be improved upon.
But earlier, it had already been detected and was being monitored, and in a previous meeting, you told us that it had been assessed that there were no threats. Even if there were no threats, why weren't the Canadian public notified?
So, Mr. Chair, what particular object are you talking about? Which
number
incident?
one and number four, or the one over the Yukon shot down. Number three, pardon.
So, Mr. Chair, with the first object, so we need to realize that this was the first time that we had encountered an incident like this. And so the assessment was very important to get a better understanding, a better characterization of what it was gathering on, what threat did it actually pose. Given that it was at 60,000 feet, above the flight patterns of commercial aircraft, it did not pose a threat to the safety and security of commercial aircraft. And so we had time to analyze it.
Mr. Chair, if I could add one thing in terms of, Chief is quite right in terms of threat assessment, but also when you are dealing with objects and you're not exactly sure what they are or where they're from, you do not necessarily want your adversaries to know what you know. And so given that there was no threat, I would question the value of going public with information earlier.
Okay. Given the radar gap that we have in General Air, would you consider airspace protection an area of consideration that Canada has shown it's not yet prepared to tackle?
And so, Mr. Chair, we've had this challenge for a long time, and NORAD modernization is going to plug that gap.
Well, what does this mean for the growing risks in the Arctic? The gaps aren't plugged. We have aggressors in the area.
So, Mr. Chair, that speaks to the necessity of ensuring that we've got the capabilities and the readiness to deal with an increasingly dangerous world.
What degree of resource investment would be required to ensure Canada can adequately protect its citizens without the support of the United States? We're talking maritime, not just air.
So, Mr. Chair, I think we need to take a look at our competitive advantage. We're going to be in an era of competition and confrontation, certainly for the rest of my career and probably for the rest of our lives. Canada is, given our position in the world, it would be unrealistic for us to go it alone. Thus, our competitive advantage is the network of friends, partners, and allies that we have around the world. And thus, investing in those relationships, maintaining the engagements that we have, is just so important for our ability to collectively deter imperialism, adventurism, expansionism from those powers that don't respect the rules-based international order, that would reform what the world looks like to be in their vision.
Thank you, Ms. Gallant. Final question to Madame Lambropoulos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess a lot of the questions have already been answered, and so I'll kind of ask something that I didn't get the chance to ask the minister in the last round. Of course, NORAD investments and investments in infrastructure in the north means that we're working a lot in areas that are controlled by First Nations communities. And I'm wondering what foresight is being I guess what's being planned in order to make sure that these communities remain protected, that they have their rights respected throughout this process over the next 20 years as we continue to build infrastructure in the area for NORAD?
Thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. A couple of points. We've already detailed today how engagement worked on a specific, incident, but there is ongoing and regular engagement with Indigenous peoples as we plan for NORAD modernization. I would flag a couple of things. Indigenous people are actually quite involved in NORAD modernization already, including some contractual arrangements to maintain the existing North Warning System, contracts to support alerts, and as we go forward with future plans, we will continue to do that. And so we are engaging both from a procurement strategy perspective, but also from an infrastructure perspective to make sure they are well engaged along the way. And Jonathan, if you want to add anything, please do.
Thanks, Deputy, and thanks for the question, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would add is that the specific infrastructure investments associated with the NORAD modernization plan are to be located at existing Canadian Armed Forces locations, so the forward operating locations that NORAD uses, and also some existing fighter infrastructure in southern Canada. Having said that, as we enhance those existing locations and build additional and modernize our infrastructure, we absolutely intend to consult very closely with local First Nations groups, and indeed, some of those early engagements for the NORAD, for the Northern NORAD infrastructure investments are already underway.
Thanks.
Well, that brings our questioning to a close, but before I bring the gavel down, I just wanted to thank General Eyre for his recent trip to the Ukraine and give him an opportunity, if he wished to take it, to comment on his trip to Ukraine and to Poland and the training that's going on by Canadian forces.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you mentioned, I was in Ukraine last Thursday, Friday, and in Poland on Saturday and Sunday. So I'm not sure what time zone I'm on. But I will say the engagements that I had were illuminating. I had the opportunity to sit down with my counterpart, the Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, for a number of hours to talk about future plans, equipping, challenges that they are facing. We had detailed briefings from their general staff. What Canada is doing is well appreciated. And we need to maintain our resolve because this is going to be a long, drawn-out conflict. And for Ukraine to survive, it's going to be predicated on the West's resolve, our collective resolve to continue to support them. They are deeply appreciative of Canada and what we've provided. I went into Poland and I visited our troops. Well, first of all, I met my Polish counterpart, who again was deeply appreciative of what Canada is doing to support Poland and the front line of freedom in Eastern Europe. I visited our troops who are training Ukrainians and talking to them, the sense of motivation, young troops telling me that this is the most meaningful thing that they have done in their lives. Mr. Chair, the Canadian Armed Forces is filled with great Canadians, people who want to make a difference. This is an organization that is making a difference in the world, and the world needs more of us. The Ukrainians I talked to, and in Ukraine, I met a number of non-commissioned members who had undergone training under Operation Unifier. So thankful about what Canada has done. And we need to keep it up. We need to continue to support Ukraine in their battle for survival against brutal, naked aggression that really drives home how much the world has changed. Again, we're facing an era of confrontation for the rest of our lives. We're facing adversaries who only respect hard power. They view compromise as weakness to be exploited. And so the rules of the game have changed here. And if we want our national prosperity to continue, we have to be willing to defend our democracy, willing to defend the rules-based international order, and willing to support friends like Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think the round of applause from all sides of this chamber indicate that we are all behind you, and we really do appreciate your service. With that, colleagues, before I bring this meeting to an end, I want to make sure with my clerk we're going to present the budget on Friday for travel. I'm hoping, colleagues, that we will somehow or another have worked out our difficulties about travel. With that, meeting is adjourned. We'll see everybody Friday.